Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm Ryan Wormeli, joined today by Derek Brown and by Andrew Erickson. We did a show yesterday. We're doing one today. You know that it is getting into the season or closer to the season when we're doing shows basically daily with the three of us and, of course, sprinkling in Joe and Welsh and Fitz and everybody else. We're getting to that time of year, just less than 2 weeks away. So super exciting. How are you feeling, D-Bro? I mean, it's like, I feel like we've been talking forever about like, hey, it's getting closer. Now it's like basically here.
I feel good, man. Overall, it's a feeling of excitement and energy to get here to the season. There's a little bit of, I'm not going to say impending doom, but you're like, oh dear, here comes the grind. It's coming, baby. But yeah. I mean, overall, man, I'm ready for it because we've been talking about all these players and situations and what could happen. I want to see it all unfold. I want to see how much we get right, how many of these situations go sideways, and how many players step up.
It really takes the pressure off in season because the NFL like determines our storylines and like we just kind of react to what's going on, and the rhythm of a weekly NFL schedule is just a lot more straightforward. So it is in a sense kind of relaxing, but it's also, like you said, a grind. Erickson, less than 2 weeks out, how are you feeling?
Feeling pumped up, and I'm still trying to figure out which takes I want to ride or die with heading into the season, and some things maybe I should take back before the season because we still got time. The season has not started yet, so we can change.
The Cortland Sutton Memorial Hot Take Award.
We can change. Yeah, the Cortland Sutton Memorial Hot Take Award. We can change our opinions. We are getting new information as preseason games are going on, and there are some contract disputes going on. So again, we're trying to take everything and update the rankings accordingly and give everybody the best action and advice that they can do going into their draft. So that's what I'm trying to do.
It was a sign that I went into our like expert platform to where we, adjust our rankings, and I got the notification that was like, hey, this date is coming up where it's your last chance to finalize your draft rankings. And that's how I know we're getting close because they're warning me that it's almost done. So let's jump into today's show. We're talking best mid-round value picks. Pretty straightforward. We're looking at guys going from round 5 to round 10 is how we decided to designate it. Obviously you need to nail your early round picks. The first 4 rounds or so is like the core of your team. And late round picks is where you find league winners, but who stands out in the middle round? You can get great values here. You can find league winners in these rounds for sure, and these guys can be the core of your team. They can really go either direction, and it really builds out like whether or not you're going to have a championship roster or not often comes from these middle rounds. So we wanted to have an episode where we really highlight those and focus in on these rounds specifically. Quick reminder for everyone that all of our 2024 consensus rankings and tiers can be found at fantasypros.com/rankings. And also I wanted to ask if you're tired of draft day uncertainty, because if you are, the Cheat Sheet Creator is your personal guide to perfect league-specific rankings. Visualize your path to victory as you add tiers and sync your league to craft custom rankings, ensuring every pick is strategic and tailored to your league settings. Enter your draft with confidence. Sync your league today at fantasypros.com/draftwizard or on the Fantasy Football Draft Wizard app and use Cheat Sheet Creator to dominate your draft. All right, guys, let's jump right in. We're going to start off with round 5. D-Bro, who is your best mid-round value pick in round 5?
Guy that we saw in preseason week 3, and I'm going to push back. I know people are going to look at this and they're going to say, didn't we just see Anthony Richardson throw a pick 6 in the preseason? Why are you bringing him up? Because we just want to clown on him. I'm sorry, man. Like, did everybody watch that entire game? He carved them up on the first drive. Second drive, third drive, miscommunications with his receivers. He talked about it in the postgame. Nothing has changed for me with Anthony Richardson. He still has QB1 overall upside. And if you're talking about the guys that can win you a league from these middle rounds, that conversation has to include Anthony Richardson. I mean, last year we saw in the full games he played, he averaged more fantasy points per game than freaking Josh Allen, more fantasy points per dropback than any other quarterback in the NFL. So if we're going to start this conversation, this is the player we need to lead it off with.
Yeah, there's very few names at the quarterback position that can truly be league winners because just inherently, like, the scoring tends to be close to each other. There's a lot of really good options. It's a deep position. Richardson is one of the guys, though, that could fall into that category. Erickson, where do you have Richardson ranked?
I have him ranked right in this range, but I don't know if I love the value of him in round 5, to be honest, because if I can take someone like Mahomes or Lamar in round 4. So I'd have to reach a little bit to get someone that I know is going to finish as a top 3 fantasy quarterback I have no reservations about it. Like, we know that's going to happen most likely. So I only have to reach a little bit more, or I could just wait and draft Jaden Daniels. Like that's the way I'm at least viewing the situation where Richardson, I get the upside. I totally get it. I don't really care what happened in the preseason game because one of the thesis of the play is he's going to run. He didn't run at all. So that's the other thing you have to keep in mind. Yes, I think that the passing is going to be up and down a little bit, but they were throwing the ball a ton. So I like that for Michael Pittman and the receivers. But value proposition, I think that he's not the best value on the board where he goes. And I think that I'm approaching the quarterback position a little bit different than Derek.
I was going to ask, are you more likely to take, if you're not taking the quarterback in kind of this mid-round section, are you more likely to take one of those elite guys before we get to round 5 or more likely to wait till later?
Probably going to wait till later because the chances of Mahomes, Lamar, any of those guys falling, it's probably not going to happen, especially in more casual leagues where the quarterback's ADPs are higher anyway. And Kyler Murray, round 8. Jordan Love, round 9. Jaden Daniels, round 10. I feel so good about those players and where I can start them. And I feel like I have top 5 upside with them. Maybe not QB1 overall. I could argue that I think Kyler Murray does have QB1 overall upside. So that's the way at least I'm viewing the board.
I actually had somebody DM earlier, a listener to the show, asking kind of about quarterback strategy. That was earlier this morning, and they were asking about like, hey, I'm interested in getting Kyler. I don't want to wait and get kind of stuck with, Daniels or Lawrence. And I'm like, that's awesome. Like, I will happily wait until like those guys in tier 2 and like even tier 3. I'm just super in on this year. I have been all off season, so I'm really on board with. I mean, if you find a good value with one of the top guys, like, get it. And also I do like getting Richardson a lot. Just like I don't want to miss out if he does really like explode and finishes as QB1. But by and large, pure value, like I am loving waiting on quarterback this year. And really every name in tier 3 I'd be happy with. There's none of them where it's like, oh man, I got stuck with like Jared Goff or Trevor Lawrence or Caleb Williams. Like I'll happily take them even though they're QB 15, QB 16 range in our expert consensus rankings.
I also, one last note, I also think that I'd be more likely to go quarterback early in a 10-team league or in a league where there are very shallow bench spots because I don't want to have to roster 2 quarterbacks. And that sometimes happens when you're going late round quarterback and you pick the wrong guy and it's a bad matchup. Then you're streaming and then you have 2 roster spots when I only have 4 bench spots and one of them has to be a quarterback. That can be really annoying. So in deeper leagues, that way I can draft Jaden Daniels and I can draft Trevor Lawrence. Great. I got 2 guys, roll with these guys. It'd be great. Feel good about that, but where I have no bench spots, I would be more likely to pay up because I don't want to burn 2 spots on my team for quarterback. And if I'm paying up, I'm not going to roster another quarterback.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I totally agree 100%. Erickson, let's go to your first mid-round value pick here in round 5.
Mark Andrews for me, tight end. He's my tight end 1 this year. I think that this is the year, again, why I want to go late round quarterback because I want to draft an elite tight end. So, again, it doesn't necessarily need to be Mark Andrews. Any of those elite tight ends that fall into this range, that's who I'm looking to scoop up, but I just like Andrews the most. Look, since his second year breakout in 2019, his finishes, tight end 4, tight end 4, tight end 1, tight end 3, tight end 4. His ADP is tight end 4. So I think you're getting him at a stone cold floor. I think he has a ton of upside with Lamar Jackson. That's Lamar Jackson's guy. We like Zay Flowers. They're talking about Isaiah Likely. I think at the end of the day, when they get in the red zone, if it's not Derrick Henry, it's Lamar looking for Mark Andrews. So again, before his injury last year, tight end 3 overall, averaging 12.2 points per game. That would have ranked first among all tight ends last season. So I think that he fits this system and this offense really well. Year 2. So I love Mark Andrews.
I will never forget, I was working at NBC Sports Washington in 2019, and one of our guys went to Ravens training camp, and he came back, and I was like, hey, man, because I'm a Ravens fan. So I was like, hey, man, what was it like? Like, did the team look good? Or,
I wasn't aware.
Yeah, I was just saying it. I was like, did the team look good? Like everything like that. And he was like, dude, draft Mark Andrews in fantasy. That's Lamar's like best friend on the team. Like, and that was back in 2019, and that hasn't changed. Like when he is healthy on the field, like that is where Lamar looks time and time again. I really like all the early tight ends, frankly. Like I'll be happy if I get anybody in the top 7. So I'm not coming away with Mark Andrews in like every league or anything. I know, Erickson, you were above consensus on him. I'm comfortable with any of those guys, but I do like getting one of those guys in round 5. And if it's Mark Andrews, I'm certainly thrilled. D-Bro, is this like, I know like Trey McBride is your guy. There are other tight ends you like, but do you see Mark Andrews as a good value in round 5?
Yeah, I love Andrews. I mean, that's really, and that's why I didn't pick Andrews or a tight end for this conversation. I'm drafting a lot of Trey McBride. I'm drafting a lot of tight ends and paying up. We've talked about this a lot this offseason and draft season where we want one of these elite guys. And while Erickson's going for Andrews in round 5, I love McBride in round 4, or I'm going to wait and take Kyle Pitts or George Kittle at the end of that run of elite guys in round 6. So this has nothing to do with me not picking Andrews because I don't love him. I mean, I'm definitely going to have exposure to him across multiple leagues and best ball teams this year because I think he's a fantastic pick.
It's time for this week's player that we would give almost anything to draft to our fantasy lineups, brought to you by Uber Eats. That player is Terry McLaurin, which is D-Bro's pick for the best value in round 6.
Love Terry McLaurin this year. He is going to crush. I mean, I just want us to rewind for a second and understand that before last year and Sam Howell just ruined everything, Terry McLaurin was top 20 in all of the efficiency metrics that we care about. He was wide receiver 21 in expected fantasy points per game last year, but because of quarterback play by Howell last year, it bumped him down a peg. I think McLaurin comes screaming back. He's a wide receiver 2 in my ranks, and I think he has wide receiver 1 upside this year.
Erickson, what do you think about McLaurin? Because I firmly agree.
I guess for me, I kind of want to throw the question back to D-Bro. What do you think is what's the highest you could see McLaurin actually finishing?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Because that's where, because I like the value of him, but at the end of the end of the day, I know worst case scenario, he'll probably be in that wide receiver 20, 24 range. Again, he has a rookie quarterback. We like Jaden Daniels, but traditionally, unless you're CJ Stroud, you don't uncork and unleash massive wide receiver production. Again, the targets have never been a concern with McLaurin. We know he's the number 1. I mean, they traded Dotson, but that doesn't really matter to me. I think that he was going to be the number 1 anyway. So where do you see his ceiling? Is it, hey, wide receiver 12? Like, that's a win, right?
Yeah.
But can you see him cracking, he's like top 5? Like,
no, I think the conversation for him starts just looking at my ranks. I think the conversation starts at wide receiver 11, like him versus Chris Olave for total upside.
Yeah. I just wanted to bring that up. So I do like McLaurin. I think that he's a good value where you can get him. And I think that his floor is secure. He's going to be the alpha in that passing game. And if Jaden Daniels has a CJ Stroud-esque season, I know that we're really high on Jaden Daniels. So I could definitely see that coming to fruition. And it's interesting because when you look back at who McLaurin has played with, right? It's not a great list of quarterbacks, but when I was looking back at some of the ADPs of McLaurin, especially when he was a little bit younger and we weren't really sure what his full ceiling was, when the Commanders, or I don't know, maybe they were the football team at this point, I don't remember, when they had Ryan Fitzpatrick as their signed quarterback who basically played one game and then got hurt immediately, that year McLaurin was drafted as a top 10 wide receiver. That's where he was going in ADP. So the expectations for McLaurin have been really high. And after so many years of wide receiver 2, the thing that I guess I would compare it to is, could he be this year's, I love doing this year's this player, this year's DJ Moore, right? He's in that wide receiver 2 purgatory forever, basically. And you're never really sure if he's ever going to break out of the wide receiver 2, but we know he's talented. And now he gets a new quarterback. Is Jaden Daniels the best quarterback he's ever played for? I mean, maybe. We'll see. But the targets are definitely there. The talent is there. So, yeah, I can definitely co-sign on McLaurin, especially in the middle rounds where I want to be taking wide receivers.
I love that DJ Moore correlation. That was chef's kiss. That was very nice.
Erickson, I made this point on the show recently. Like, this is his lowest ADP since he was a rookie and unproven and, not a day 1 pick. Like, every other year, once he established himself, he has been going much, not just higher, but like much higher in ADP than he's going this year. And yet this is the year with the best quarterback of his career in all likelihood. Like, to me, it doesn't compute. Like, I'm all in. To answer your question about kind of the ceiling, like, I think he could finish. He's not going to finish top 5, but like, I think higher than 12. Like best case scenario, like, other guys are going to get injured too, right? Like, he's going to get the targets. If it really kind of all comes together this year, I could see like that wide receiver like 8 or 9 range. Again, certainly would not project that. Like, I'm not going to draft him as if that's what's going to happen. But like, if we're talking true ceiling, like, I think it's like reasonably high actually. Well, like, I'm really excited.
I guess now that I'm thinking about it more in my mind, right? We think about, I know with them, I'm not trying to bring Marvin Harrison Jr. to this, but a lot of Marvin Harrison's projection is about, well, when Kyler Murray had DeAndre Hopkins, he was a wide receiver 1. Well, who was the offensive coordinator when that happened? Or the head coach? It was Cliff Kingsbury. So we've seen a Kingsbury offense focus around one receiver and then a bunch of jabronis. So we got Zach Ertz. We don't really know who the wide receiver 2 is. So, boys, we got to draft more Terry McLaurin.
Well, and the thing too, like you said, like the Dotson trade doesn't matter that much to you. It matters a little. Like it's just one less name to.
Depends on what you thought about Dotson.
I'm not like a Dotson like truther or anything like that, but it's just one fewer guy. I mean, like even to that whatever small degree it is, it's like even more so cementing McLaurin as like he will get every target he can handle.
But before we move on here, I just want to put a bow on Erickson's amazing DJ Moore correlation here. DJ Moore, wide receiver 28, 23, 33, and then last year, wide receiver 9 in fantasy points per game. Let's go.
It's unanimous. We want Terry McLaurin.
It was Justin Fields, his best quarterback.
So that's why the guys, including myself, would give up almost anything to draft Terry McLaurin this season. That was this week's Uber Eats Player of the Week. Get almost anything for game day delivered with Uber Eats, the official on-demand delivery partner of the NFL. Order now. All right, Erickson, who's your round 6 best value?
Okay, we're talking about who quarterbacks' best friends are. We know Mark Andrews loves Lamar Jackson. It's Tank Dell. Tank Dell for me. CJ Stroud loves him. I don't want to overemphasize the splits and the 12 personnel. Does he play in the slot? It's kind of noisy to me, honestly. You know, a lot of this preseason usage I think is very actionable. When it comes to wide receivers, I talked about this on a show, I think with Tom earlier this week. Jahan Dotson, right? Great usage of the preseason last year. What did that do? Nothing. Sky Moore, great preseason usage. Didn't mean anything. So sometimes, especially receiver, right? What does it come down to ultimately at the end of the day? Jonathan Mingo. All the routes you could possibly ask for last year. Squat. Diddly squat. And you know who the best receivers were? Tyreek Hill. He wasn't even running top 20 in terms of total routes run. It's about talent at the end of the day with receiver. And what do I know about Tank Dell? Elite separator. What else do we need to see from his rookie year to say this guy's not an uber talented player? Yes, he's a little bit undersized, but I was trying to compare a rookie quarterback and rookie receiver that essentially had a breakout the same year. And I want to pose a question to you guys. Can you guys remember a rookie receiver quarterback duo that broke out together in year one? I had to do some digging. I couldn't really think of it, so I'll give you guys anything off the cuff because there's really only one answer in recent memory. So if it's not coming to you right now, you're probably not going to think of it.
Give me the year at least here, Erickson. Like, toss me a bone here.
2012.
Crap! That's too long ago. I'm still not gonna get
it. That was Luck, RG3, yes. Russell Wilson.
Okay. You're going around.
Who was the rookie?
Going down the right path.
Who was the rookie receivers those years? I remember the quarterbacks better than the receivers.
I'll take over.
Yeah, you could just say it.
So it was Andrew Luck and T.Y. Hilton. Hilton was
a rookie. Okay, yeah.
Hilton was a rookie.
Yes.
Okay, I almost said Hilton, but I was like, I don't think he was a rookie that year.
Yes, yeah, I think he was.
By the way, did you know T.Y. Hilton's son is like a college recruit next year? Like, dude, that made me feel so
old. He's not the only one.
Guess what?
They're all coming, baby.
Yeah, but T.Y. Hilton is like a recent, like, I drafted him in fantasy, it feels like 4 years ago.
Frank Gore Jr.
I was going to say, dang it,
yeah, but Gore's a freak. He's an outlier.
Frank Gore can still put the pads on, baby, and run it today.
Yeah. No, but that's an interesting point about how, like, it just doesn't tend to happen for rookie QB and wide receiver together.
Yeah, so I think that this is a really special connection that we should not overlook. We want to draft Tank Dell. He's so cheap compared to the other Texans receivers. And I don't know who the number one Texas receiver is going to be, but I think that the best value proposition is going after Tank Dell. He looks like he's fully healthy. Last year, when he was on the field with Nico Collins, same exact production. So again, I know that it's complicated and you don't feel comfortable because I don't know who's going to be the target leader. Well, CJ Stroud is as advertised. It's not going to matter. Like when we saw Tom Brady firing on all cylinders, Antonio Brown, Chris Evans, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, we started all of them every single week and nobody thought it was great. And I think that we could see that potentially in Houston. So again, I'm a little bit lower on Nico just because he's the most expensive receiver. So for me, it's Tank Dell. CJ Stroud loves him and therefore I want to buy into him. And I can't also, again, with the comparison to T.Y. Hilton, if you guys remember, again, this is back in fantasy day. If you guys remember, he owned the Texans, right? T.Y. Hilton, every single week, he's the guy that wore the clown. Again, bringing back the clown mask because I talked about Nico Collins' fade. I'm going to have to show up to week one with the clown mask. But who can save me in that is if Tank Dell shows up against the Colts in week one, has a big game, then I'm not wearing the clown mask. Because if it's a big game for Tank Dell and Nico Collins, I'll take that as a W.
We should have just framed this as the player that CJ Stroud would do almost anything to draft. Because guess what? He did. Yes.
That's amazing. Yes, we will send that to Uber Eats. Yeah, I think it's spot on. And it's like you said it at the very top, Erickson. Like, no need to overthink it. Like, everything CJ Stroud has ever said tells us that he loves Tank Dell. Like, it's his top target. He brings him up constantly. Like, he did that offseason thing with Micah Parsons where he was building his ideal offense. Like, he was throwing out like Calvin Johnson, Larry Fitzgerald, and Tank Dell. Like, he CJ Stroud loves this guy, and like for good reason.
Tank
Dell's
Dell
awesome.
is
Yeah,
good.
you don't want to say Tank Dell was the dragon meme in that, like where it's like bing, 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 but like, I mean, you were like, oh, okay, well, there's that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, we're not saying Tank Dell is like along the lines of Calvin Johnson, but the point is that Stroud adores him, and he's going cheaper than the other Texans receivers. Like you can, like, I just want to get one of these guys, so I want to get the cheapest one anyway. And if the cheapest one happens to be Stroud's, by all accounts, favorite target, like, that works really well for me. I also think there's like a non-zero chance that Stroud just like throws for 5,200 yards this year, and all three of these guys are really good. Like, again, you're not going to bet on that, but like, Stroud is that good, and you usually see a year two leap from quarterbacks. Like, I would not be surprised if all
he
three of
goes
these receivers feast.
Full Peyton Manning and we have 3,000-yard receivers this year, would anybody be that shocked? I mean,
No,
I know it would be insane.
I might raise my
but
eyebrows. I'm not going to be stunned.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I love the Tank Dell pick. I'm getting him in as many leagues as I can. Let's go to round 7. Debro, who is your mid-round value pick here?
Oh, I'm glad I got into the show sheet before Erickson because I was afraid he was going to take this guy from me, but it's Chris Godwin, man. I know Erickson's loved him all offseason. I was slow to come around, but I'm here now, man. And this all comes down to, yes, Chris Godwin's going to go back in the slot. I think that's amazing things for him this year, and it's wheels up, dude. And we saw again, it did not happen the entire season last year, but Chris Godwin, when he turned it on down the stretch, it was freaking fantastic, dude. Like, after week 13, he was the wide receiver 16 in fantasy points per game, getting almost a 29% target share, averaging 83.6 receiving yards per game. You put him back inside this year, I think that's definitely going to happen, and we're going to see Chris Godwin just absolutely eat. Where he goes in drafts, I'm not going to say it's an auto button like lock pick, but it's really freaking close.
Erickson, you've been a Godwin guy in the past. Are you back in on him this year?
Yeah, 100%. Again, someone did list the 33 receivers that they think are better than Chris Godwin, and I disagreed with the list. I've said this out the bat signal to the YouTube comments. Someone did create the list. I didn't agree with it, but I appreciate the effort. And I still don't think there's 33 receivers.
That list Godwin needs to be like reviewed. I disagree with that list too.
Are you worried just with the changing like play calling?
Well, I think that works in his favor
this year?
because it's putting him back in the slot where.
But just like the offense maybe being worse because we like Dave Canales. I mean, I guess like it's a better fit for him even if the offense in this theoretical outcome does take a step back.
I mean, the offense for Godwin last year was not. I mean, he wasn't good last year. so again, okay, if he just does what he does last year, then it's a single, right? You draft him in round 7. He's a PPR merchant. That's it. I think that, but the ceiling is there if the play calling is more catered to him being a featured piece of the offense. If anything, look, Mike Evans is going to get his 1,000 yards, going to get 5-6 touchdowns. I could see Mike Evans potentially not having as productive year where Chris Godwin benefits a little bit more.
I mean, Evans screams touchdown regression, man. Like, there was so many touchdowns, and I'm not saying he's gonna have a bad year, but there has to be some amount of regression to the mean
because it never happens.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's the thing. Is Evans is like a total metronome. Like, you know exactly what you're getting from Mike Evans. However, at some point, it is gonna happen. He's into his 30s now. Like, maybe it does.
I'm not gonna predict it.
Me neither. But you know,
we tried.
It will happen eventually. It will happen eventually. I promise you that. All right, Erickson, who's your round 7 pick?
Yeah, so going to the quarterback position here, I talked about how I like late round approach, and I sometimes find that Kyler Murray falls into round 7, round 8. So yeah, sign me up for a guy that I think has QB1 overall upside. These are the best weapons that Kyler has played with, I think, at the NFL level. An offensive coordinator that he's already been with last year. Look, he was QB 11 in points per game, 10th in expected points per game after returning from a torn ACL. He's not coming into this season banged up at all. He was averaging basically the same amount of fantasy points per game as Brock Purdy, and he was injured and had no weapons. So I just love, they're talking up every single receiver on this offense. Harrison, Greg Dortch, Michael Wilson. You have Trey McBride as a breakout candidate. So I think the Cardinals are one of my favorite sneaky teams as like a division winner. I'm fading the rest of the NFC West. I really think that Kyler Murray and the Cardinals are set up. They've had a lot of great drafts. I think the offensive line has improved. He's a mobile quarterback. So for me, again, Kyler Murray averaged 22 points per game from 2020 to 2021. Averaged over 30 rushing yards per game last season. He's checking off every single box you're looking for a elite fantasy quarterback that doesn't cost it. My strategy is pseudo late round quarterback. I want the cheapest or the most upside at the cheapest price. And when I'm looking at those potential players, Kyler Murray really checks off all the boxes. So again, bringing it up, comparing him to Richardson, Kyler to me has the same kind of upside as Richardson does, and he goes way later, and he's more proven product. So for me, I like Kyler Murray, and also because I am a little bit lower on Marvin Harrison Jr., this is my little way to hedge a little bit, because if Kyler Murray smashes and I drafted him, well, hey, I'm cool with Marvin Harrison, whatever. I didn't draft him, but I'm still going to benefit. So again, I know that some people are kind of wishy-washy about Harrison's price. He's a rookie receiver, never played before. So if you want to benefit from Harrison being this generational talent, well, just draft Kyler Murray.
I really like Kyler Murray this year. We already talked about it a bit, where I also really like the later guys, so I find myself often waiting at the position. But I do think Kyler Murray has a very good chance of stepping up in a major way this season and kind of getting back to being one of those elite fantasy QB options. D-Bro, how are you ranking Kyler in comparison to, it's 2 rounds later than Anthony Richardson? Do you like that, getting the extra value there? Would you rather just wait even further and get Jaden Daniels? Where does Kyler sort of slot into that mobile QB ranking for you?
I've got him at QB 10 right now, right behind Jaden Daniels. But again, I think the conversation for him starts at QB 6 or QB 7, and I won't push back on anybody having him higher than that. And the big thing I think we haven't discussed yet about Kyler Murray is, even as the QB 9 in fantasy points per game last year, he did that, and he was objectively, you can't argue this, he was one of the worst passers in the NFL last year. Amongst 45 qualifying quarterbacks, this is where Murray ranked. 38th in CPOE, 35th in highly accurate target rate, and he had the 9th highest off-target rate. So you're telling me, that should be considered around his floor, QB 9, QB 10. That is his floor. You're telling me objectively terrible passer last year, and he was still a top 10 quarterback. What the heck happens is if he revisits the previous seasons where we saw him just blowing it up as one of the best passers, and specifically deep ball passers in the NFL, if he recaptures that type of magic, yes, he has top 3 upside. Absolutely all day.
Let alone another year removed from a leg injury, and maybe he gets even more mobile this year compared to what we saw last year. So, yeah, I totally agree. I've got him QB 7, which I think is about the right spot. I think the top 5 or 6 are pretty
Bro, did you
locked
say
in.
you had Jaden Daniels in front of Kyler Murray?
I do.
So then you're not drafting Kyler Murray. That's what your rankings
I'm
say.
drafting both, Erickson.
I'm drafting both. I think the benefit of Kyler is, if you draft Kyler, you're not drafting another quarterback, right?
That's fine, but where Kyler goes, you can take another guy, or you could. I think the conversation and the big takeaway for quarterback right now is that target rushing upside, and depending on what your league format is and how these players go in your league, I'm fine with getting all of them. I'm fine with going with any one of them. If I'm playing one league, I'm probably waiting on Kyler Murray or Jaden Daniels, and it depends on how the draft unfolds.
So if they're both there in round 10, you're going to take Jaden Daniels. That's what you're ranking. You're saying.
But do you think we're talking about Kyler Murray right now? What round? Round 7? He's not going to be there in round 10.
But that your rankings are telling you, if they're both there on the board at the same time in the later rounds, you're going to take Jaden Daniels over Kyler. That's what your rankings say, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll go with Daniels.
Okay. That's all I wanted to clear. Me and Worm are taking Kyler Murray.
Yes, I love Daniels, but I'm taking Kyler Murray over him for sure. Have you been hungry for some college football? Well, we finally get a taste this weekend. Don't miss any of the action. Jump in at DraftKings Sportsbook. It's a small but mighty slate of games for Week 0, including a big matchup in Ireland. This is going to be DraftKings' biggest college football season to date. Enjoy the ride now all the way through the expanded playoffs. Plus, all newbies getting into the college spirit, here's something extra special. New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Score big with DraftKings all college football season long. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code FantasyPros. That's code FantasyPros for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. All right, guys, let's go to round 8. D-Bro, who is your value here?
Oh, I'm wondering if people are tired of hearing me talk about Brian Robinson Jr. yet. Guess what? Doesn't matter. We're going to talk about him again. And it's so funny because Erickson threw this. I think, Erickson, you threw this into Slack yesterday. It was like, Brian Robinson is an RB1. I was like, oh, yes, I agree with this. But I think the big takeaway here for everything we've seen in the preseason, everything we've seen from Cliff Kingsbury and usage of running backs previously, as well as Anthony Lynn, is that Brian Robinson Jr. will be the clear number one running back in this offense, both in the red zone, on the early downs, and I still think he's going to out-target Austin Eckler in this offense. People are sleeping on how good he was last year. Again, we've talked about this before. I don't understand how anybody does not have him ranked inside their top 24 running backs when this man was a top 24 running back in points per game last season. But yet, we're standing at the precipice of week 1 and people still have him ranked as an RB3. Just enjoy the value. Draft all the Brian Robinson Jr. you can this year.
Yeah, this one is something that we've talked about a lot on the show, but I fully agree with you, and I don't mind you bringing it up again because he just is the best value pick in this round, in my opinion. Like, I firmly agree. For a while, I was kind of holding off, and I had him in that like kind of high to mid, RB3 range. But I've seen enough. Like, he's an RB2. Like, at the very least, he needs to be inside the top 24. Erickson, where do you have Brian Robinson?
RB21. So I'm right there with everybody
exactly
else.
Where I have him too.
I mean, I think that he's in a really good spot. Again, the only concerns really are if the offensive line is just absolutely horrible for the Commanders, but then you're hoping the scheme, having a mobile quarterback is going to help him out, and I think that he's going to be the red zone guy. So if this Commanders offense can at least be average with Jaden Daniels under center, I think Brian Robinson's going to benefit a lot, and he's been good the past 2 years. He was good last year. The joke last year was, oh, the guy that accidentally drafted Brian Robinson instead of Bijan, oh, well, he's winning right now through the first 11 weeks of the season. That was an actual joke, and it ended up being the other person was on the bad side of that joke. So, yeah, keep drafting Brian Robinson.
Do you still remember, does everybody still remember all of the narratives the first year Cliff Kingsbury was in Arizona? Do y'all remember all those where it was like, the offensive line is so terrible, they won't be able to run the ball at all. There's no way. And we're like, okay, I don't really necessarily agree with that. And then Kenyon Drake arrives mid-season. He runs for 643 yards in 8 games, scores 8 touchdowns. And everybody's like, oh, wait, never mind. That preseason take was
next
bad.
Year and a bust.
Yeah, but I mean, like, all these offseason narratives, people, like, they dig their feet in so deep. They're like, there's no way this happens. And then the NFL season comes and we're like, okay, well, yeah.
And that's when he got traded from Miami, right? That was a mid-season trade. Oh, wow. Man.
Yeah.
A lot of throwbacks
go in the
on
Wayback
this pod.
Machine.
T.Y. Hilton,
it's so good.
Kenyon Drake. Love it.
Yeah, and we saw even just yesterday some of the Washington reporters saying, like, Kingsbury is saying, like, Robinson is very clearly an RB1. Like, there's no, like,
I wanted definitive takeaway from that. Is he an RB1 or the RB1? That's what I need to know.
We'll correct it. It's okay. They phrased it wrong. We'll correct it here. The RB1.
The RB1. All right, Erickson, who's your round 8 value?
Yeah, I think that this guy is just, when you look up value in the dictionary of fantasy football, it's a picture of Diontae Johnson wearing a life jacket, because this guy might drown in targets in the Carolina Panthers. That's what I'm concerned for when it comes to Diontae, but I'm not concerned at all for the type of fantasy production he can put up. Look, we saw last year, Adam Thielen was wide receiver 25, and that was after he basically did nothing for the last 6 weeks of the season, because Bryce Young, again, it was not great, it was not pretty, but he showed that he could support at least one fantasy viable wide receiver. And last year was Thielen, and this year it's going to be Diontae Johnson in a better system with Dave Canales taking over. We saw the Buccaneers be very productive with their wide receivers last year. Even though Godwin didn't score a lot of touchdowns, he still caught a ton of passes. Mike Evans, we were fading Mike Evans, and Mike Evans put it in our faces and had another monster year. So I think Diontae Johnson, they traded for him to be Bryce Young's wide receiver 1. Leggett still is not practicing. He's been banged up during the training camp. Jonathan Mingo, we're not really sure we're going to get from him in his year 2. So for me, look, Diontae, he's had his ups and downs. He's had his drops, but what does the guy do? He gets open. He creates separation. Even last year, 26% target share when he was healthy. So for me, it's Diontae Johnson. Again, he's not a league winner unless Bryce Young becomes this amazing quarterback. But at worst, he's going to be a value every single year. He's just one of these players that slides in as your wide receiver 3, flex play, and full PPR. He's going to be a screaming value. He's going to beat his ADP. And no, again, like I said, not a league winner, but a screaming value where he goes. And people just don't click him because, what's the upside here? Oh, well, 100 catches? That's upside. Yeah, maybe it's 4 touchdowns, but 100 catches in the 8th round, right? That's the selling point. If he was a 5th round pick, like, no thanks. Like, let somebody else draft him. But in the 8th round, Diontae Johnson, it's an easy pick for me.
Yeah, to our listeners, I implore you, like I promise you, if you play in a PPR league, Diontae Johnson is going too late in your drafts. Like,
Yes.
I guarantee it. Like, he needs to go sooner. If he is healthy, he will be a very, very valuable pick. In every format, I'm like interested, but like PPR, like, holy cow, is he going too late? Debro, where are you at on Diontae?
I want to make sure that I'm always above consensus on him. I have him as wide receiver 30 right now. I'm looking at ECR has him at wide receiver 35, so I want to maintain being above consensus. And I think the big takeaway here also is last year with terrible quarterback play in Pittsburgh, and I know that's nothing new, he was still the wide receiver 33. So what are we hoping for? Bryce Young to be better than Mason Rudolph and Kenny Pickett? Like, that's not asking for a lot right now. It's really not.
Anybody who knows me knows there's basically nothing in the world I love more than going to baseball games all summer long. In fact, I've already made plans to attend not one, not two, but all three O's games out here in Denver when they play the Rockies in just a week. And to make sure I got the best seats for those games at the best price, I turned to Game Time. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. I'll be planning ahead for the O's series, of course, but one of my favorite things about Game Time are the last-minute deals. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute for not just sports, but concerts, comedy, theater, and more. I'll be headed to a concert at Red Rocks this month too, and you can be sure I'll be checking out Game Time's deals. Two other features that I love for how much it takes the frustration out of ticket buying are Game Time seat views, showing your view from the seat before you buy, and all-in pricing, so I know the total upfront with no hidden fees. Game Time is simple to use, but more importantly, the app gives me all the information I need to make an easy ticket purchase. So this summer, take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code FANTASYPROS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code FANTASYPROS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, guys, 2 rounds left. Let's go to round 9. Debro, who's your best value here?
Train doesn't stop here, baby. Christian Watson train rolls on. We're going all the way for the league titles this year, man. Look, hey, guess what? That's me knocking on wood because Christian Watson is healthy right now, baby. Walking into week 1. Let's go. I think that the health things have gotten figured out. And as long as that's the case, Christian Watson, you threw this out here earlier, Erickson, who is this year's blah, blah, blah. What if Christian Watson, 2024 Christian Watson, is 2023 Nico Collins? And I know there's a lot of things to unpack there, and there's context. Nico was held back by bad quarterback play in his first 2 years. Watson was held back by injuries. But this year is the monster breakout. Again, I've talked about it. When he was on the field and he was a starter, he led the Green Bay Packers in every single statistical category we should care about. What's changed? Nothing at all. Jayden Reed's still going to be a part-time player. They're still going to run a lot of 12, a lot of 21, especially with Tucker Kraft getting healthier by the day. And this all is wheels up for Watson. He gets the downfield usage. He gets the high leverage usage with end zone targets. So what are we talking about? We want touchdowns. We want target volume. We want big plays and the ability to create big plays because of athleticism. Watson has all of that. You want to talk about the league-winning swing where you're drafting a guy as your wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4. And if everything coalesces in 2024, he's a wide receiver 1. Look, that's Christian Watson.
Oh, I want to ask the same question that Erickson asked Debro. Like, what is, like, best case? Like, what ranking would you put him at as, like, best case scenario? Like you said a wide receiver 1. Like,
low-end wide receiver 1.
Low-end wide receiver, okay. So, like, in that, like, 9, 10, 11, 12 range.
Yep.
Erickson, what do you think about Watson?
I mean, yeah, the upside's there. Look, one of the things I'm getting tattooed on my body this year is draft a Packers wide receiver. Leave your draft with the Packers wide receiver.
Can I ask where? Where's that tattoo going?
I don't know. I got to ask Welsh where he put his. We talked about this on one of our shows.
Yeah.
Right next to the draft the Denver Broncos running back tattoo. That's the other one.
Yeah.
So,
mid lower back, more lower than
back. Chest. Chest tattoo.
No regrets.
No regrets.
Your forehead. Just
Broncos,
don't forget.
Packers. That's what I need. But with Watson, yeah, the upside case is there and the price is so suppressed because of the injuries that I'm all for it. I want to take stabs on all these Packers receivers. Before said, we have 4 number 1 receivers. Now, is that going to play out that way? Probably not. But look, they're all going outside the top 36 receivers, essentially. I know Jayden Reed's the most expensive, but I'm not shying away from any of these guys because I think Jordan Love can lead the NFL in touchdown passes. Jordan Love is one of the highest favorites for MVP. If he wins MVP, who do you think's coming along the way? All of his top receivers. And again, if guys miss time, one guy gets hurt, and then the target floodgates open up for one of these other players. Yeah. So again, given that Watson is healthy right now, you're going to feel pretty good about having him in your lineup and kind of see how things play out. Week 1, they're playing the Eagles in Brazil. Let's go. It'll be fun.
How excuse me, how are you ranking these guys, Erickson? Like, do you have Reed 1, Watson 2? Do you have Dobbs up there? Like, what is the order you actually have these 4 guys?
I think I have them in order, whatever their ADP is, because I just think that I think all their prices are fine. I think that you should draft them at their prices. I'm not, because I think that I don't want to be overconfident in saying, oh, well, I know for a fact that Watson's going to stay 100% healthy. And like, I mean, again, this is about Christian Watson, but Jaden Reed was nasty as a rookie and a prospect I really liked. So I'm not going to put Watson ahead of Reed because Reed was good, or Watson was productive when he was healthy last year and good as a rookie. Jaden Reed did everything I dreamed of he would do year 1 and more, essentially. So I'm not going to look away from that. He broke out as a rookie, and then that's really impressive. So for me, it's kind of in line with ADP. But if you're following my rankings, you're drafting all the Packers receivers, which is what my tattoos say to do.
Devro, what's your order on these 4, by the way?
I've got Watson, right, and I'm looking at, so ECR has a Jaden Reed, wide receiver 37. Watson is at 38. Romeo Dobbs is at 53. And Wicks is at 62. I've got Watson at 33. I've got Jaden Reed at 42. So a big gap there. And really that's not, I mean, he was a wide receiver for 43 and expected fantasy points per game. So I just think there's touchdown regression that's likely to hit. I've got Dobbs and Wicks as in that wide receiver 4/5 territory.
Reed is the one that I'm not getting a lot of, kind of for the reasons you laid out, Debro, and just because I've been leaning towards Watson ahead of Reed, just aiming for what I perceive to be kind of that extra high upside. I get why there's upside with all these guys, obviously, and I think they're all very reasonable picks, but I've just been getting way more Watson than Reed, so I have him just one spot ahead, actually. Erickson, who is your round 9 guy?
Sticking with the late round quarterbacks here, I'm going with Tua Tagovailoa for the Miami Dolphins. And this is when I'm waiting till my very final pick, essentially, because I say round 9 here because that's where his ADP is. But if you're in any one quarterback league, Tua is going to be one of the last picks you can make, essentially. Like with Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert, when everyone is pushing off quarterback, you basically draft Tua when you see your 11 other league mates have already drafted their quarterbacks and no one's going to draft Tua or touch him. Because when I'm looking at what he could do as a late round quarterback, we know what this Miami Dolphins offense does, especially early on in the season. They're unstoppable. We saw Tua last year. He led the NFL in passing yards. And I love the opening schedule for him. And this is something that's super key when you're going with a late round quarterback strategy. And this is why you can't draft Will Levis, in my opinion. He plays the Bears on the road in week 1. Do you want to start Will Levis week 1 against the Bears? No. So for those reasons, you need to know if you're going with a more fringier quarterback, what's their opening schedule? And for me, Miami's is just so juicy. Jaguars at home, Bills at home, at the Seahawks, home against the Titans. I mean, that's why I love Jalen Waddle. That's why I just think that this offense is going to score a ton of points because their defense can't stop anybody. And Tua, we're going to look, oh wow, Tua is a top 5 quarterback 4 weeks into the season. Now, is that going to last? No, definitely not, especially as a pocket passer. But if I'm looking for value at quarterback, Tua to me, especially early on in the season, and maybe you can sell high if someone's believing, oh my God, this is going to sustain. It didn't sustain last year, so it's probably not going to sustain this year. So that's just something I would look at when I'm really trying to punt quarterback to probably one of my last picks. So again, his ADP is round 9, but as you'll find if experienced drafters, I mean, in the Yahoo draft we did for the FantasyPros Insider League, there were tons of quarterbacks still left in round 12, 13, 14, including Tua.
I love your point about the schedule, too, and also all those games at home, like early season Miami games, defenders get tired.
Dude, they're going to be
chasing around Tyreek and Devon Achane. Like, they're going to be gassed by, like, the 10-minute mark. Like, I mean,
Tua has top 5 upside for fantasy quarterbacks in week 1
that matters
versus Jacksonville.
To me. That's why I have Tua ranked pretty high. That's why I have Tua ranked over like Brock Purdy, because I think that he's going to start like gangbusters, whereas the 49ers are team bad vibes all over the place.
So if you're drafting... If you're drafting Tua, are you getting a second quarterback with him knowing that you're probably not going to want to start him later in the year?
No, because at that point, I think I'm going to be able to get waivers or I could just trade Tua. So you just trade him
That's
for
fair.
whatever mobile quarterback doesn't start off well or is kind of bumpy. What if Richardson kind of has like an up and down campaign and be like, hey, Tua leads the NFL in passing yards. Then, hey, I got Richardson for the value of a last round pick.
To your point, Erickson, his schedule weeks 4 through 8 is
It's also good. Yeah.
amazing. Dude, Tennessee, New England, Indy, Arizona. I mean, just 300 yards, 300 yards, 300 yards, 300 yards passing every single week.
Exactly. It's like, again, I don't even really like Tua that much, but I can't ignore.
I was surprised you put him on this list because I remember the don't draft Tua train and you poo-pooing it all last year. So to see this name here, it was very surprising.
I'm just a slave to the schedule. Okay.
You really are. I can't say Tua Tagovailoa without thinking of my friend who calls him Tua turn the ball over because he's top 5 in interceptions last year. And I don't even think of him as that type of quarterback, but
that's more like Garoppolo, honestly.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I was surprised you included him too. I'm glad you did because I thought that was a good kind of breakdown of Tua. Erickson, I was surprised by that too. Debro, in round 10, you've got another quarterback here as well.
Yep. Again, if you're not going to pay up for Anthony Richardson, the elite guys and stuff like that, and you're not going with Kyler Murray, Jane Daniels, like we talked about, there is a really, really good case to be made for waiting on Trevor Lawrence. And right now, I've got Trevor Lawrence above consensus. He is ECR QB 16. He is my QB 11 right now. And talking about players that we have over Brock Purdy, I have Trevor Lawrence over Brock Purdy. And a lot of this is we're not playing for last year's fantasy points. We're playing for this year's fantasy points. And what we saw out of Trevor Lawrence was bad injury luck, just run bad the entire year. Being the QB 13 in fantasy points per game, he was the QB 7 in expected fantasy points per game. And all they did this entire offseason was add weapons around him. Bring in Gabriel Davis. We could say, we won't make our jokes about that. Still an upgrade. Bringing in Brian Thomas Jr. You still have Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram there. They're going to freaking throw the ball all over the yard. And this started even last year. They just didn't have the weapons to be really good at it. Weeks 12 through 18, we're discussing an offense that was 4th in neutral passing rate and 6th in red zone passing rate. So we want passing volume, and we want passing volume inside the 10, inside the 20. If we get all that this year with improved weapons for Trevor Lawrence, he's an easy top 12 quarterback, and you're going to get him in the later rounds of your draft. It's just easy money.
I've got him in my top 12. I have him right at 12. I want to
it.
be ahead of consensus on Lawrence. I am expecting big things from him this year. And again, he's one of the big reasons why I don't mind waiting at the position because he's QB 16 in ECR right now. Like, I will happily take him as my starting quarterback in a 1 QB league if I can wait as late as I can to get him. Erickson, obviously, you're big on Tua. Are you also interested in Trevor Lawrence kind of going in a similar range?
Yep. Yeah, I think I like Lawrence more long-term, honestly. And, I mean, week 1, they play the Dolphins. So, again, DFS, stack it up. Going to be betting the over in that game for sure. So
that's going to be a fun game.
And I think, I've thrown out, I think Trevor Lawrence can lead the NFL in passing yards, bets on the Betting Pros site. I've talked about, I love Brian Thomas. I'm the Brian Thomas guy, but you guys are the ones talking about,
Yep.
How is Trevor Lawrence going to get there without his number 1 receiver, Brian Thomas?
Yeah.
So
I like Brian Thomas too. Debro's the hater. I don't like him as much as you.
Christian Kirk,
I like Thomas.
okay?
well, let me ask you this, though. When it comes to Christian Kirk, do you, when I say Christian Kirk, do you think he's an alpha? Yes or no?
I don't think he's an alpha, but I think he's the number 1 guy there.
Okay. But those are usually those things are baked together. If you're an alpha, you're usually the number 1 guy. But so I'm just saying that there's room for someone to step up in this offense to become an alpha. And it's not going to be Gabe Davis. We can all agree on that, okay?
No, we can agree on that.
So I just think
Gabe
that,
Davis.
Dude, Brian Thomas, man, I think that, and this is not a Brian Thomas show. Maybe I could have put him as my round 10 pick, but
I was saying, why isn't he on this list?
I think we're sleeping on Brian Thomas like severely. I think he's going to have a monster season, and he's starting to heat up. Training camp, the report. Just draft Brian Thomas, please.
What's Brian Thomas's ADP right now?
I was gonna say, hold up. Let's work out this math here because if we're okay, Brian. Okay, yes, Brian Thomas Jr. going at pick 108. So tell me, Erickson, if you love him so much, why isn't he the name that I'm staring at for round 10 here?
Is 108 technically round 10? Or is it like round 11?
No,
by
that's
like 1? That's probably
no.
why.
It's round 9, right? Because 10 in a 12-team league would be through pick 120. So that's the last pick of round 9.
Well, full disclosure, I'm going to draft Brian Thomas over Tua. So, just to be clear.
And by the way, Thomas is going later in some spots. Like on our consensus,
he's going later in some spots.
Our consensus on Fantasy Pros is wide receiver 49, 117th. So that is, later into fair. Round 10. So in that range. But yeah. I think it's a good call. Erickson, take us home with your last mid-round value pick, who is not Brian Thomas.
Yes, is not Brian Thomas, but you should draft Brian Thomas still. This guy is Chase Brown. I've been on Team Chase Brown since the very beginning, since Fitz brought up how he was an absolute workhorse at Illinois, and you go back and be like, yeah, this guy was an absolute monster touch workload. So for me, again, it comes down to Zach Moss versus Chase Brown, the debate that's battle between fantasy analysts all across the industry all summer long. We haven't even seen Zach Moss at all in the preseason. I know he's been dealing with an illness, and then they didn't play any of their starters. So again, week one, we're going to learn a lot. I don't know how the workload's going to be shifted, but I think that at this price, it's cheap enough to wait and find out. And what I do know is Chase Brown, I think, is the better overall pass catcher. I think that the lack of a third running back, at least they haven't added anybody yet, suggests that they're feeling better about his progression and pass protection going from year one to year two. I know the preseason game didn't look great from a vision perspective, but hey, it was 5 carries. So for me, I'm just buying into, I think this guy's explosive upside. I don't think that he necessarily needs a lot of touches to be productive because of what he can do as a receiver out of the backfield. And I think that besides Jamar Chase, I think that he could be the next guy in terms of, hey, we need to generate a big play. Who's that coming from? I think that is Chase Brown. So in round 10, is he going to be the workhorse, the number one running back for week one? I'm not so sure, but I'm willing to take a stab and to find out, especially at a round 10 price tag. For a guy as a second-year running back that we usually see guys take big leaps in year two. And you look at the year two running back class, right? So we have Gibbs and Achane. Those guys are already valued very highly. Charbonnet, is he going to take a big step? Probably not. Not with Walker there. Kendrick Miller, Dennis Allen hates him, so that's not going to happen. Tank Bigsby, Roshan, again, Jaleel McLaughlin to the moon. But if there's going to be another second-year running back that steps up here, I think it really could be Chase Brown. So that's who I'm going to take here in round 10.
If you are a listener of this podcast, you will be drafting a lot of Chase Brown because we've been talking him up for a while here. D-Bro, are you among that? I know Fitz and Erickson are the ones I hear talk about it most. I can't remember. You're also on the Chase Brown train, right, or no?
I have moved Chase Brown up in my ranks right now, and I just want to make sure that I'm right on this. That yes, I wanted to say I just didn't want to. I didn't want to say something and be like, then look at my ranks and be like, whoop, never mind, that's totally wrong. I have Chase Brown ranked above Zach Moss, and I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I think Zach Moss is, and use your failing running back of yesteryear. He's this year's Miles Sanders. He's this year's Alexander Madison. This all comes down to say that Zach Moss is one of the worst picks that you can make in fantasy drafts this year, and that leads me to drafting some Chase Brown.
I said that like 3 months ago, dude. Come on.
Yeah, I know. I'm just trying to help you. Some more tattoos for that mid-lower back.
Yeah. But it's probably not as bad a pick anymore because his ADP is much suppressed since the last time I said it. But
you're going to run out of skin area to get all this ink, Erickson. But the last thing I'll add on Chase Brown, and this comes out from one of the Bengals beat reporters today, is that with concerning Chase Brown and Zach Moss, and this is a direct quote, as for the top two, expectations are still an even split, though we have seen a good amount of Chase Brown running with the first team lately in camp. That is already, like people's early offseason takes were, oh, this is Zach Moss's job, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, as soon as we got training camp news, and this is where we talk about pivoting with more information as we go through the process, I changed up the ranks. I had a giant chasm between those two running backs. And then I'm like, oh, well, if Chase Brown's already getting first team reps and he's already splitting work with Zach Moss, okay, who do I think is the more talented back out of these two guys? It's Chase Brown. Okay, then there's an avenue for Chase Brown to be the guy that gets 65% of the work. If he can distance himself by playing well on the field from Zach Moss, that avenue, if we're already starting off with it's 50-50, it might become 65-35, 60-40 very quickly.
They've really been like two ships in the night in terms of their ranking, because at the start of the summer, it was Zach Moss 10 plus spots ahead of Chase Brown in running back rankings, and they've gotten closer and closer. And I certainly have Chase Brown ahead of Zach Moss now. That gap has definitely narrowed to the point where by the time we get to September, I think Chase Brown might even be consensus ahead of Moss. I mean, we'll see kind of where it ends up.
I don't think that a lot of at least when I was doing our value show, we talked about Chase Brown. A lot of the ADPs still have Zach Moss ahead of Chase Brown. So that's the other reason why, again, if you're going to take a shot on ambiguous backfield, usually it's the cheaper guy you want to go after.
Yeah,
The
right now in
80
ECR, it's Moss is 32 and Brown is 34. That should be
Okay,
flipped.
yeah. I was going to say the ADP is still, there's a wider gap, but in the rankings, that's where it's gotten a lot closer. So only 2 spots away now, and we'll see where it ends up. All right, we'll get out of there on that. Great discussion today, guys. Hope everybody enjoyed the episode and has enjoyed all of the content. This has been a very busy week with a lot of shows. We had Fantasy Fest at the beginning of the week and then shows every day. So I really appreciate everybody for kind of sticking with us through all the shows and all the content. This is a really super fun time of year. So I'm glad everybody's tuning in and paying attention to what we have to say. So for Erickson and Debro, I'm Ryan Wormeli. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you again next time.